Stone Cold Steve Austin arriving in a beer truck and almost drowning Mr. McMahon in beer, Vince getting a headpan shot in his hospital room, Steve raising hell with a zamboni and jumping on his boss, McMahon pissing his pants after thinking he was going to get shot by the Rattlesnake, the first stunner ever on the WWE boss at Madison Square Garden. If I tell you that all of these historical moments come from one same rivalry, you're going to think I'm crazy, right? Well, it does, and it is perhaps the only storyline ever that has offered so much of those. Together, we are going to dive into the glorious Attitude Era and determine all the elements that make this feud between the Texas Rattlesnake and the former boss so special. You are on the Wrestling Paradise. Why the rivalry between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mr. McMahon is legendary. Here we go.
What?
Who can sit at my table and tell me this rivalry between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mr. McMahon is a little overrated and not that important in history? Not many people, I think, and that's quite normal. It is probably the most famous one in pro wrestling history, and also the one that largely helped the company to beat WCW in the ratings war during the Attitude Era at the end of the 90s. Before I tell you why, in my opinion, this is an extraordinary rivalry, let me present it to you quickly, and you will see that it is not just any storyline. From the moment that Stone Cold gave him his legendary stunner at Madison Square Garden in September 1997, but especially from April 1998, just after the Texas Rattlesnake won his first WWE Championship title at WrestleMania 14, this rivalry gave the Federation the momentum it needed. As soon as there was a focus on this storyline between the evil boss and his rebellious employee. Monday Night Raw beat the rival WCW company in the ratings for the first time in 83 weeks. And let me tell you a few facts so that you realize the impact of the feud between Austin and McMahon. Hang on to your seat. The Austin 316 t-shirt is the best-selling wrestling product of all time, and in 1999 alone, Stone Cold earned $15 million from merch sales. In October 1999, the company was able to go public. In the heart of the rivalry, it attracted between 5 and 10 million viewers, which overall makes it the one that has attracted the most viewers ever. The 1999 Royal Rumble match, where Austin and McMahon were number 1 and 2, is the second best-selling Rumble in history. St. Valentine's Day Massacre, the show where they faced off one-on-one for the first time on February 14th, 1999, generated 450,000 pay-per-view buys, which is more than several WrestleManias in the 90s. That's incredible. Their rivalry, without including its early moments and the ones that recreated it for one night only, essentially lasted from April 1998 to July 1999. And then you might ask me, why did it have so much success according to you? What made it so iconic? Well, take a seat and let me explain everything to you, or at least tell you why it's so great in my eyes. Prepare yourself. First, something that I personally love about this whole story, and that clearly appealed to the millions and millions of viewers at the time, is the fact that it is universal and that it can speak to anyone in the world. Let me tell you why. This is the story of an employee, a working class man, who gets screwed by his tyrannical boss but who doesn't let that slide and who makes his life a living hell in return by doing to him what a certain number of human beings probably dream of doing, hitting their boss or any other authority figure. Obviously, it can speak to everyone, and it goes far beyond the wrestling bubble because it's universal. You don't need to love or know wrestling to find yourself in this story and want to see these two characters go at war with each other, to see how Stone Cold will overcome all the obstacles that Vince can put in his way and destroy everything in his path. To be completely honest, one dimension that I like a lot in this story of the evil business leader against the angry common man is that we believe in it because it's based on reality, on real life. The fact that Vince McMahon, as the boss, is not a big fan of the idea of having Steve Austin as the poster boy of his company if the latter is champion is something realistic. A guy who drinks beer, who makes finger gestures, and who is more than politically incorrect in his way of speaking. That's probably what most business leaders want to avoid to represent their organization. And even the very beginning of their story, when Stone Cold broke his neck against Owen Hart at SummerSlam in 1997, when he had won the Intercontinental title, but the Federation didn't want to let him wrestle because of his injury and stripped him of this belt, which would lead to Stone Cold getting pissed off and stunning everybody, including Vince. All that is also realistic. It's what can happen for real in the daily life of the company behind the scenes and in any other sports structure. And in all this situation, we are not in a fabricated story that would not really resonate with real life, like when a traditional superhero character with a cartoon-esque behavior confronts a big bad guy. As a matter of fact, Mr. McMahon really is the boss of the company, Steve Austin really is his employee, WWE really is a company with workers, some being preferred to others. We can buy this story. I could summarize everything in one sentence. Hang in there. The rivalry between the Rattlesnake and McMahon is a symbol of the struggle between the blue-collar worker and the establishment, And let me ask you this. Do you think this rivalry speaks to the huge majority of the viewers, the casual fans, those who watch TV every night to be entertained without being hardcore wrestling fans and who are likely to be part of the more than 150 million employees there are in the United States, for example? Of course, it does speak to them. In a way, we can say that these millions of viewers were living out their fantasy of fighting their boss vicariously through Stone Cold Steve Austin. Do you also sometimes feel like giving your boss a stunner if you have one? I also love the idea of having a clash of completely opposite personalities between the wild side of Austin and the more corporate side of McMahon, where one has a quest in this case to become the champion, and where the other wants to prevent it by all means. This is what we had during the heart of the rivalry, with Vince always imagining new schemes so that his enemy would almost have no chance of winning, using different henchmen throughout the storyline such as Mick Foley, The Undertaker and Kane, The Rock. They would also bring totally new elements to it regularly, such as, for example, the 1999 Royal Rumble, where Austin and McMahon were the numbers 1 and 2 in what was the last chance for Stone Cold to get a title opportunity, and also with a bonus of $100,000 for whoever eliminated Austin. There's this idea of a hero who pursues a quest and who must overcome all imaginable obstacles on his way, especially antagonists. If we look closely, it's the basis of many stories that have fascinated millions of people, such as Hollywood blockbusters, video games, some of the best-known books such as The Odyssey, TV shows such as Prison Break or Mentalist, the theme of a hero's personal quest just like Stone Cold, who, after years of people not believing in him when he had to be the ringmaster or when he got fired from WCW, wants to have his revenge by becoming champion, is an idea that I personally love. I like it even more if there are difficult obstacles and great antagonists. Tell me in the comments if you like this kind of stories too. But this is clearly a huge quality of the feud between Austin and McMahon, according to me. It would be impossible not to salute the constant creative efforts of the writers Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara in this storyline and story, everything interesting and never do basic wrestling matches. Can you only imagine that in this rivalry we often had incredible stakes and stipulations that made you really want to watch? I'm going to list you some of them, and I dare you not to be interested in these matches at all. Are you ready? A title defense from Stone Cold at Breakdown 1998 in a triple threat against The Undertaker and Kane, who were in destruction mode and allies, where Taker and Kane can only pin Austin to be champion. A first blood title match between Stone Cold and The Undertaker at Fully Loaded 1999, where, if Taker bleeds first, Vince McMahon must leave the Federation forever, but where, if Austin bleeds first, he will never have a title shot again. And wait, it's not over. Don't go anywhere. A ladder match between Stone Cold on the one hand and Vince and his son Shane on the other to determine who will take full control of the company after Austin became the CEO, at King of the Ring 1999. So, what do you say? Interested or not, we have to acknowledge all these efforts in terms of creativity and innovation to make us want to watch and make sure that each match is unique. That was also the great strength of this rivalry. Between the weekly shows and the pay-per-views, the company made sure to always create swerves, drama, cliffhangers at the end of each show to make us want to come back the next week. As a matter of fact, it was exactly like a TV show. You had a story with two main characters, developed over several months and full of episodes, just like a soap opera with different seasons, new characters who come into it. Moments when the storyline between Vince and Steve goes away for a little bit to favor another angle for a few weeks and finally comes back even better. That's wrestling I like to watch. Do you too? Do you also want to be entertained by several stories during a show with good characters and look forward to the next one the following days? That's how the rivalry between Austin and McMahon was, and it may look like this storytelling culture of hooking viewers with stories just like a TV show has become more and more rare over time in WWE. Do you realize how great it was at the time to have millions of people following it every week and talking about it at school and at work? That's tremendous, and tell me if you agree with this vision of considering wrestling as a TV show, if that's what you like about pro wrestling or if it's something else. And again, that's not all. There are other equally great elements that make this rivalry iconic, so make sure to stay tuned because you won't believe it. What I also find excellent about this storyline is that it was so strong it could elevate any other wrestler associated with it. For example, it enabled several guys to have a massive exposure, and not just any of them. Listen to this. The Rock, who, at the 1998 Survivor Series, became the corporate champion and Mr. McMahon's golden boy. Big Show, who made his debut at the end of St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1999 in the first match ever between Steve and Vince, and in a memorable way to say the least, since he appeared in the ring as if he came out of the ground. And even Mick Foley, who after being betrayed by Mr. McMahon, would eventually win his first championship title in January 1999. My point is that this angle had the huge strength to easily incorporate new characters into it, to be Vince's henchmen for example, and they became instantly interesting because this rivalry was so hot. By the way, this is also the first storyline in WWE history where we had a babyface fighting for his goals against a heel authority figure, a scenario that they tried to do again several times afterwards, with Daniel Bryan against the Authority for example in 2014, CM Punk in 2011 too, and others. Can you imagine the influence that this rivalry had to a point where, years after it, they tried several times to recreate it with other characters? But of course, all of this would have been less entertaining and exciting to follow if we hadn't had two phenomenal performers, Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin. They had the charisma, the intensity, they were living and breathing their characters. And that's not a coincidence. It's because they were playing versions of themselves amplified to a 1000. They are larger-than-life superstars, and for your information, it was also the first time that Vince was physically involved on screen in a real rivalry. It seems like all the stars were aligned for this angle because just a few months before, he became the biggest heel in the business by screwing Bret Hart in Montreal on November 1997, the infamous day when he forced Bret to lose the title just before he went to WCW. And during this time, Austin was becoming more and more popular. And what's also crazy is that if he hadn't injured himself at SummerSlam 1997 against Owen Hart, he might have never become this rebel character who stunned all the authority figures who refused to let him wrestle, including Vince. If we also consider the fact that the feud between Stone Cold and Mister McMahon was supposed to last only a few weeks in April 1998, since they were initially waiting for Mick Foley to come back from injury, but that they continued thanks to the good ratings. But also that Austin almost left for Hollywood at the end of 1998 before everything was handled by Vince and his staff in a crisis meeting in the middle of the night, we can really be impressed. This rivalry really could not have happened at all, and yet it made history. Don't you think it's incredible, seriously? The fact of the matter is that the chemistry between Austin and McMahon is obviously one of the ingredients that made this storyline even better. It was perhaps the most popular babyface of all time against the best heel ever, and they completed each other perfectly. I'm not afraid to say it, it was a masterpiece. As Austin himself said, their rivalry was magic. They both had the same passion and the same feelings about this business. Let's be real, who can come and tell me about another rivalry that has as many classic scenes as the one between the Rattlesnake and the former boss? Because there's no doubt about it. For a feud to become legendary, it of course needs memorable moments, segments that make our jaws drop. And with Austin and McMahon, there's a whole lot of them. Take a deep breath. The one with the Zamboni, where Stone Cold even destroyed electrical equipment and almost killed official Bruce Pritchard, who was in gorilla position. The one with the beer truck, one of the most famous ones that I love. It was completely crazy and Vince's acting was off the charts. The one with the Corvette with the cement, which for the record costed $25,000 to produce. The one at the hospital that I think is legendary too. The one with the fake gun and the Bang 316 flag where Vince literally peed himself. The iconic one where McMahon is revealed as the higher power above the corporate ministry to supposedly make Stone Cold's life a living hell. The really funny ones where Austin was the new CEO and did a tour of the headquarters, which was top-notch entertainment. The one where the Rattlesnake sang Kumbaya on his guitar to cheer up his old enemy, which was completely surreal. And then, how can we not mention the controversial but still notorious one of Austin's heel turn at the end of WrestleMania 17 when he shook hands with Satan, as good old Jim Ross would say. The amount of legendary scenes is amazing, and it is the reflection of a desire to always go further, to push the limits every single time. Obviously, it's no coincidence that the Federation managed to captivate so many viewers for weeks with this rivalry. Vince Russo himself, one of the writers at that time, said that their mindset was to make each show better than the previous one. In fact, everyone wanted to see what was going to happen, and especially what Stone Cold would imagine this time to victimize his boss. It was a good balance between a long-term plan that was to develop the rivalry between Austin and McMahon and a mentality where they wanted to go higher and higher every week. Keep the huge momentum they had and be fully unpredictable and chaotic. It was so great. And I'm not even talking about the genius of having their first one-on-one match in a cage on Valentine's Day, which is incredibly well found. At that moment at St. Valentine's Day Massacre, they had been smart enough to protect this match for months and months, to build a huge history between them so that their match would be a tremendous event when it happened. Between us, Let me tell you this. At the time of this rivalry, everything the company did in it turned into gold. It drew huge ratings that allowed them to put down their competitor. It made wrestling mainstream and made millions of people love it. So it's true we could say that the heel turn at WrestleMania 17 ruined everything, but don't you think this rivalry already went everywhere it could go? What could they have done that would be completely new at that time, in 2001? Yes, it was shocking to see Stone Cold and Vince become the best friends in the world, and to see Austin sell his soul to the devil, and at the same time, spit on the whole character he had built all the previous years. And it's a fact that it made a lot of viewers change the channel at the time, and contributed to end the golden age of wrestling. With also The Rock's departure for Hollywood at the same time, and the changes that took place in the creative team. Do you think it was during this specific period that WWE gradually lost its momentum? Obviously, that's an idea that makes sense, and it's such a shame. But on the other hand, it was certainly mind-blowing to see Stone Cold hugging and being friends with Mr. McMahon, and wasn't that what made these scenes funny and surreal? At the same time, it enabled them to go into a more comedic register in which Steve and Vince were also good, and it would have been a pity to never do all these scenes that were also super funny, I think. Like the one that I love with the hats with Kurt Angle, whether we like this period of their storyline or not. It enabled them to renew themselves, and the fact of the matter is, they had already given us everything they could offer us as enemies, in my humble opinion. What is certain is that I love this whole rivalry, that for all the reasons I said, it is incredible, and it is undoubtedly the most important in the entire WWE history. Now, you know what makes the rivalry between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mr. McMahon legendary in my eyes. Come tell me in the comments what you think. If you also believe it was great, or if you are maybe a bit less enthusiastic about it, if there are rivalries that you think are better or not. We can say that this storyline was awesome. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?